The 10th stock I ever bought was Nexia Biotech. The late 90s is now mainly associated with the internet bubble and the subsequent .com implosion, but it was also a time when the Human Genome Project was in full swing, humans had successfully cloned a sheep, and just like how right now AI is going to solve all our problems, back then it was genetic engineering that was going to fix everything from incurable diseases to climate change. Nexia was the perfect illustration of this. They had found a way to express the genes for spider silk in goats. The thinking being that they would be able to create super strong thread for use in all sorts of settings, from military to engineering to surgery. On the basis of this revolutionary technology, but no real earnings, I bought 200 shares of Nexia for $7.65 a share. After commission, it cost me $1,559. I'd like to welcome to the show Pericles Rellas. He is a financial coach. Is that what you would call yourself?
I refer to myself as a money mindset expert.
And you talk a lot about resetting your financial thermostat, right?
Yes.
But you started off with a degree in theater arts?
You've done some research. Yes, it was a very different path that I was on when I was back in college, and kind of fell into this, as it were, and made a huge shift around 1994. And I have been on this path ever since then. It was just kind of one of those things that showed up and really inspired me beyond anything I'd ever been inspired about before. And I've been doing it ever since.
Were you a theater kid growing up, though?
Well, yeah, my mom and dad were both in the theater. My godmother was in the theater. I was surrounded by people who were in the theater. So, yeah, it was quite an interesting upbringing.
Did you grow up in LA?
Yes, born and raised in Los Angeles. Both my parents were in New York. My mom was a Broadway actress, and then when they came to LA, mom retired out of the theater to work full-time and raise kids. Dad continued in television. He worked as a staff writer for Gunsmoke and some of those, really popular, he loved Westerns, those Westerns of the times. And then my godfather was a musical composer, and my godmother was an actress who was in the original Benji film and did all sorts of commercials and things like that. And so I was always connected in the theater in some way, and just naturally thought, well, that's going to be my path. And then got into college and decided to make a shift after that.
And was it just because it was tough finding work at the time, or?
No, actually, I stopped college early because I got a job as an equity stage manager, which was kind of the dream of what I was looking for. And for the next several years, I worked all over the country, including in Toronto, as an equity stage manager. And then when I got back, and it was, I would say, around 1993 or so, 92, I was kind of like burned out on it. It's a challenge. I admire people who can stick with it for a long period of time. It requires something, both on the talent side and the backstage side. And so for me, it was kind of like I'd run my course and I was ready to do something different. That's when this came about.
So were you touring with a company?
I was actually so I was in LA working on a show called Nightclub Confidential. And it had Scott Bakula in it. And then that show went to Boston. And so I went with it to Boston and opened the show there, stayed there with them until it closed. And then from there went to the Gloucester Stage Company, Israel Horowitz's Gloucester Stage Company, did a show there. And then came back to the United States, or came back to LA, worked on several shows, the LA Theater Center, worked on a show that was LA's longest running show, which has roots in Toronto. It was called Tamara. And it was this interactive show where you followed the characters around this massive chateau, and you could actually walk with them into rooms, and it was really cool. And then I went to Toronto for a show with Nichelle Nichols, who was from Star Trek. She was doing a one-woman show there. And she and I had met on another show that I was working on. And she and I clicked, and she said, look, I'm doing this one-woman show in Toronto. Do you want to come with me as my stage manager? So I went up there, did that, then came back to LA after that was finished, because it was just a limited run. And then we came back to LA, and I continued to work on Tamara right up until it closed. And that was kind of when I decided, you know what, it's time. I'm ready to try something different.
So then what happened there? How did you get into advising people on their finances?
Yeah, it started as self-exploration on my part. I realized that there were aspects of life that for me, my life, that were unexplored. And I wanted to really start to look into that. And somebody shared something with me about this organization called Landmark Education. They do self-development, things like that. And I was interested and curious. So I went, did it, loved it, absolutely saw something like, oh my gosh, this is extraordinary. And then went into their leadership program and then ended up leading their leadership program for several years. And it was at that point I really took on. I love working with people. I love elevating people as a coach or as a mentor, however you want to define it, and helping them in that way. And so that's when I started my business as a coach. And I was working with clients to help them be more effective, more successful at their business. Or if they were just an individual, I really wanted them to just be able to make more money. And it was in that process that I started to notice that my clients, while they were making more money, they were doing exactly what they wanted to do when they came to work with me. They were still in the same situation they were in before they came to me. So what that means is if they were somebody that was always behind on their bills, they were still behind on their bills. If they were just short every month, they were still just short every month. Or if they had stress and anxiety and worry around money, they still had those things even though they were making more money. And it literally didn't make any sense to me. It was like looking at a blue sky and saying black. It just didn't make sense. And so I started to explore it and look at, well, what's going on here? Why do we see these patterns? And over the next 2 years, I discovered two things. One is that we have what you referred to earlier as a financial thermostat, and it works just like a thermostat in our house. It regulates how much money we can earn, how much money we can keep, as well as our emotional states, our thoughts, feelings, and emotions around money. And then the second thing was how to reset that financial thermostat. And I started to apply it with my clients, and the results were extraordinary, just kind of went off the charts. And they started sharing it with their friends and their business associates, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And that's when I realized this is something that I love doing because everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to do that thing that will have them be successful. But most people aren't looking at the fundamentals of how they relate to money. And so, they can watch your show and get all these great ideas on the best way to approach it. But if their financial thermostat is still set here, they're never going to be able to get up here because just like a thermostat kicks on when the room gets warm, turns on the AC and brings down the temperature, our financial thermostat does the same thing. We make more money. We just disappear that money to bring it down to that same setting.
Yeah, that's a very common thing you hear from people that they've started making lots more money, but it all just seems to go away. You adjust your spending to match your income.
Yes. And we can see that in some of our most successful athletes. And we can see that in lotto winners. There's a reason that a majority of lotto winners go broke within the first 3 to 5 years. It's because they haven't reset their financial thermostat. So all this money comes flowing in, and then we can watch it. We see it happening. They will just spend and spend and spend and disappear that money until it comes back down. And oftentimes they'll end up going broke, which is unfortunate. And same thing with our athletes. We have professional football players who've made tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. They retire and they're broke within a short period of time. Their financial thermostats are not at a setting that will allow them to keep that money, to make more money with that money, and then to live a life where they have the experience of being fulfilled and joyful.
So when and I guess I don't want you to give away the secret sauce here, but when you're dealing with your clients, is this more about their emotions and their feelings towards money?
Great question. And I don't mind giving this away at all. In fact, I have a webinar on my website that is the 4 keys to resetting your financial thermostat. It's free to anybody that wants to watch it because it's so fundamental to everything that we do. The first thing that we look at is what I like to call the way money flows. It's a currency, and as a currency, it flows like a current, like water or electricity or wind, but it flows in a distinct way in that it flows in a circle. And so we intersect that circle. So money flows to us, through us, and away from us, and then back around to us, through us, and away from us, and with a reservoir on the side that we get to keep. Now, because money flows in this circle, blocks anywhere in that flow are ultimately blocks everywhere in that flow. So we're blocking money coming to us. And that can look like, I hate my boss. I hate the rich. I think money is the root of all evil. Those are all blocks in the flow of money coming to us. Well, that ultimately is going to block money flowing away from us and then back around to us. And of course, into that reservoir on the side that we get to keep. blocks in the flow of money going away from us are things like, I hate paying my fair share. I hate paying my taxes. I hate paying bills. I hate paying full price. I always want to hold on to my money. I'm stingy or I'm terrified to spend. That's blocking the money flowing away from us and then ultimately back around to us. And then to that reservoir on the side, blocks in that flow, I don't deserve it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not worthy. All of those things can be blocks in the flow. So the work that I do is clearing those blocks out so that once those blocks are cleared, what happens is money flows more abundantly to us, through us, and away from us, back around to us, through us, and away from us with that reservoir on the side that we get to keep. And we do the same thing around emotions because this financial thermostat regulates how much we can earn, how much we can keep, and our thoughts, feelings, and emotions around money. So we're clearing blocks in all three of those areas. And when we do that, we see we have this ability to earn more. We have the ability to keep more. And most importantly, and this is the hardest thing I think for most people to realize, most importantly, we have a sense of enough. We have a sense of joy and satisfaction and fulfillment around money. Now, that doesn't mean we don't go make more if we want. It just means, wow, I'm actually satisfied and happy right now. Gets us off that hamster wheel of, I got to earn more to be happy. I got to earn more to be happy. I got to earn more to be happy, and gets us to that place where we are fulfilled right now. And then what's the next game we're going to play around making more money?
And so you've been doing this for, I want to say like 30 years now?
Almost 30 years. Yeah, 30 years now.
And when did you develop the concept of the financial thermostat?
Financial thermostat came up in the first 3 to 4 years. I originally called it something different. It was called their condition. As I looked at it and I was like, God, everybody has this condition around money. And so that just naturally was the first thing that I called it as I was implementing this with my clients. And then as I continued to do the work and developed it, I explored it more and more and understood it more and more. And it just created a life of its own. One day I was like, it is just like a thermostat. I think people can relate to it much more effectively than condition, because condition can have this weird stigma to it, like there's something wrong with me, versus no, I just have this setting. I had nothing to do with it getting set. I probably wasn't even present when it happened, but there it is, and it's regulating everything. And if I can go in and reset it, then I can actually start to earn more, keep more, and have this better experience around money.
And you find a lot of this comes from the kind of experiences we had as a youth or how our parents were?
Absolutely. That is the source of it. You know, most of the things that I dealt with in terms of my blocks around money, because one of them was, and I remember it vividly when I was about 6 years old, watching a show on TV called The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And it was, you may know it.
Robin Leach.
Robin Leach, exactly. And this particular episode was all about this family that was very wealthy, but completely broken, like just damaged beyond belief. And at the end of the show, my mom says very casually, nonchalantly, I never want to have that kind of money. You'll lose your whole family. Well, at 6 years old, I heard that and I decided, not consciously, but subconsciously, I'm never going to make a lot of money because I don't want to lose my family. Well, that financial thermostat setting got put in place right then. I didn't know it, but it was the glass ceiling that I just kept bumping up against right up until I created this education and then applied it to myself. And suddenly I saw, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got this total block around money. And when I cleared the block, then I was able to move forward. And so it's not requisite that you know what the actual incident is, like I did when I was 6. It's important to know that there's an it there. Because when we can just identify the it, then we can clear that it out, even though we may not be able to see what came from here or it's a result of that. None of that's important. It's just important to know the block.
So it's all Robin Leach's fault. That's the thing.
All Robin Leach's fault. Yes. If he was still around, I'd have a grudge to...
Well, he probably is responsible for a lot of people that keep striving and wanting more and more and more because they remember watching that as a kid and going, yeah, I don't have that chateau in France yet, so I got to keep going.
Yes, exactly. And here's the interesting thing, Terry, that I think about that is part of the evolution of this work that I've been doing is that people relate to money in a way that money can never provide. So in other words, they expect money to provide something that it can't. They think money will provide them with joy. They think that it will provide them with happiness. They think that it will provide them with love. They think that it will provide them with security. And I'm here to tell you, it does not provide any of those things. And I know people they argue with me about it all day long. Well, it can't provide you security. You know, you can buy whatever you want. Yes, but you're always worried about losing it. You're always worried about who's going to sue you next. You're always worried. So it doesn't provide that security. And I've worked with people who are literally billionaires on the Forbes list, and I've seen them absolutely joyless, and nothing is ever right. Nothing is ever perfect. They're always struggling to the next thing, and they've just never found it. And I've worked with people with very little money, and they are completely fulfilled and joyful and happy in their life. And they have no worries. So it isn't the money. It is actually a state of being. If we can get to that place of being happy and content right now in the present with whatever we have, then that will follow us through. And what money actually is an amplifier. It simply amplifies who we are. So if we're somebody who's joy-filled, happy, and content, the more money we get, the more we're going to be of those things. If we're somebody that's on the opposite end of that spectrum, the more money we get, the more it's going to amplify those things. So it isn't the money that's making us a certain way. It's us making us a certain way. And it's just us, if the money amplified that which we already are. So if there are people out there that worried about, oh, money's evil. Money's not evil. Money is not good. Money is just money. It's a currency. Who we are and what we do with it is what is good or evil. And that's where we get to choose. And that's where the real fun and power comes from.
Yeah, I really like that concept. I guess it's just a way of allowing us to maybe express who we are. If you have a little bit more money, maybe you can express that joy in a different way. But also, if you're miserable, money can just sometimes make you more miserable.
Exactly. And you make more people miserable in your wake. We see it all the time. People that are they're horrible. They've got lots and lots of money and they're horrible with the people around them. And then we see on the opposite. I love using Taylor Swift as an example, as somebody who's just hugely successful, a billionaire in her own right. And she treats everyone generously and kindly. And it's just such a great spirit. That's what I want to emulate. That's who I want to be with whatever amount of money I have. And so I don't ever have to worry about money being evil because it's not about the money. It's all about me.
Maybe this is a bit off topic, but I'm noticing these paintings on the wall behind you, and I've seen them in your videos. You've got that fancy one behind you, and then something that looks like a memo there beside you. Are there stories that go along with those?
Yes, absolutely. I am a huge fan of France. I lived in France for 3.5 years. I spent 10 years traveling to France before I ultimately moved there. And so I started collecting over the years many, many different artifacts from France. And so that is a portrait of Madame Pompadour from the 18th century. She was Louis the 15th's favorite and one of arguably the most powerful woman in all of Europe during the time of her reign as Louis the 15th's favorite. And then that right there is an actual document that was signed by Louis the 14th. And so it's got his signature on it. It was one of the decrees. I think it was for somebody who was traveling as an ambassador. And so he had this document with him with Louis' signature and all of his, cabinet members or whatever on there saying that this is who this is and he's traveling under the protection of the king. And then I have just other things. That's an etching of the Chateau of Versailles from 1700s. This one right behind me, I wish that one was real, but that's an actual picture of a portrait that I loved and wanted, but it was a little bit out of my price range. So I settled for framing the picture of it, and I just love looking at it. So I surround myself with beautiful things, but my life is not beautiful because I've got beautiful things around me. My life is beautiful because I say so. And then it allows me to enjoy the beauty of the things that I have around me. I come into my office every single day and I'm so happy with my life that it's amplified by all the beautiful things that I have around me. And on the inverse of that, if I was unhappy with my life, I would come in and say, I need to change all these things out. I need to get something new because we're always looking for the outside thing to make us happy versus the happiness coming from within.
Let's talk about investing then. What have you done with your own money? Can you tell us about the first investment you've ever made?
Sure. So the work that I do, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not licensed to do any of that, right? What I find is most valuable is if you get the advice from that licensed professional, are you able to actually take the actions that they're telling you? Or are you going to tweak it and sabotage it because of your financial thermostat? Or are you going to implement it, get the success that you want, and then disappear the money, right? That financial thermostat setting is what's really important. And so what I educate my clients on is first we clear those blocks out. And then what is it you want to do? Well, I'm thinking about investing, for example. Great. Go educate yourself on investing. Go discover what investing is all about and understand what it is they're saying you should do with your money and why. What are the pros and what are the cons? What are the risks and what are the rewards? And so when I first started looking at investing, that was one of the first things that I said to myself, look, I'm not going to just go, because a lot of people love to say, I'm just going to turn it over to a financial advisor. I'm going to let them handle it. Great. That's like giving your baby over to a complete stranger and saying, take care of my baby. Right? We would never do that. I don't know what they're going to do with my baby. I don't know anything about them. You need to have an understanding of what these financial advisors are going to do with your money and why. Are they trying to enrich themselves, or are they doing what's in your best interest? And that's why I want my clients to educate themselves. So one of the first things I did when I first started investing years and years ago was find an S&P index fund, because I knew that S&P index fund is going to grow year over year, even if there are bad years.
Okay, but how did you figure that out? What were you reading? Were you looking at Jack Bogle or what was that?
I was just consuming as much information. Well, and first of all, you got to remember back in 1995, 96, the internet didn't exist like it exists today. So it was a little bit different, but I consumed as much as I could on the different things. And I spoke to people that I knew were successful. And I went to them and I said, look, I'm looking at doing this. I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And what's important to know is bring critical thinking to whatever somebody says. So I have friends who are very successful because they built a business and then they sold the business. They're hugely successful because of that. But their perspective is exclusively from that point of view. Well, you need to start a business and you need to grow that business. You need to make sure you've got some proprietary information or some patents that you can sell, and that will create value for your company. Okay, well, that's great. But if you're not interested in building a company, what do? Right? And so it's looking at all the different elements, the different reasons why people are successful. What did they do that had them be successful? What actions did they take? And what are the sticky points for me around that? Like, oh, he did this and this and this and this, and I'm afraid to do that. Well, that fear is a block in the flow. So handle that fear, get that fear complete. Doesn't mean you have to take that action, but it means I'm no longer afraid. I'm no longer run by my fear. I can actually look at it with open eyes, and I can understand it with using my critical thinking and say, you know what? I like this, or no, I don't like it. And I'm going to find something else that really speaks to me. And then start to take those actions and take them small. And then I learned about diversification, realizing, okay, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. You want to make sure that you're diversified. So if something happens in this one place, well, you've got these other places that are going to shore it up. And then don't operate from your fear. Like the market tanks, last thing you want to do is sell. You're now selling at the bottom versus, you know what? I know it's going to come back and I've got some cash reserve. Maybe I'm going to start buying while everything is really low, knowing that I'm going to get even more value out of it when it comes to that comeback, because it will come back. I mean, just look at the history of it, right? But we can't do those things if we're operating inside of the financial thermostat that we currently have. Once we get those blocks cleared, then we can start, wow, I can really look at this and I can really look at that. I can look at bonds. I can look at stocks. I can look at investing in individual businesses or creating my own business or starting whatever it is that I want to do. Once we're freed up, we have that critical thinking ability, and then we can make the choices that work for us.
That's very unusual, though, in my experience, for someone to choose right from the start what I would say is the best place to put your money, an S&P index fund. What made you do that? Was it advice from someone or something you read?
I wish I could tell you what it was, but I think it was somebody that told me about it. And they said, look, rather than trying to throw a dart at a dartboard and find that one thing, the one Amazon or the one Google or whatever that is, because yes, we love to see those things. And we live in a culture right now where everybody wants to get rich quick. They all want that opportunity, like, oh, I've hit it. Well, you can spend your whole life trying to find that and never get there, versus creating something and building it slow and sure and steady and continuing to add on to it. If you're 19 or you're 20 right now and you're listening to this, or 25 or 30, and you start investing on a regular basis into some index fund, whether it's S&P 500 or the whatever, you're starting to build that. And every single month you're putting money in there and putting money in there and putting money in there. 25, 30 years from now, you could be a millionaire without ever having to think about it. The problem is most people won't take those first actions, or they will take those first actions. They're like, oh, but I'm going to sell it now and take my money out, or I'm going to do this. I'm going to double down and try to get rich. Maybe it works. It's like lightning striking. But rather than that, have the financial thermostat of, you know what? I'm going to let this grow. I'm going to let this build. I'm going to let this grow. I'm going to let this build because I am building wealth and prosperity versus a get rich quick scheme.
So you bought an S&P index. Was that in an IRA or was it in a 401k?
It started as a standard brokerage account. And then all of a sudden, I started realizing, oh my gosh, there are all these different kinds of IRAs. There are all these different opportunities where I can grow my money tax-free. But again, this comes with education. And we have so many things that are available to us now on the internet where we can go and open a brokerage account. We can open up our own IRAs. We can open up our own 401ks if we've got our own business. We can do all sorts of things that we couldn't do 30 years ago as easily and as quickly. And now you can do it literally in 5 minutes. You can have a brokerage account set up. You can have an IRA set up. You can have your, different kinds of IRA, all of that, and start that auto investing every single month. And then it's about making sure that I remember when we first started it, I was just putting money into the IRA. And at the end of the year, I'm like, man, the stock market went up so much. This is exciting. And I went and looked at it. There was nothing. It was the same. Well, what happened? Oh, you have to invest that money. It's not just putting money into the IRA. You have to actually pick something. It's like, oh, okay, now I understand. But it's these kinds of things that we learn from. And rather than beating ourselves up with, like, oh, I'm so stupid. And there it is. Well, that's another block on the flow. I'm going to tear myself down. No, I learned from that experience. And now I won't make that mistake again. I'll move forward. So it was all about those building blocks.
I don't want to paint all actors with the same brush, but I mean, your parents were in the theater. I don't imagine that finance was a big topic at home.
Not at all. And it was not because they were in the theater, but because they were children of immigrants and they never spoke about money. It was completely off topic, taboo. We would not, God forbid you should ask somebody how much money they made. Oh, that was a conversation I would get really handled if I did that. You never ask somebody how much money they make. That's just rude. But if we actually started speaking with our kids about money, speaking with our kids about what it is, how it flows, what our blocks are, what are their thoughts and considerations around money, and start exploring it on a regular basis, they would grow up inside of, oh, I need to learn more about money. I need to have a better understanding of money so that I can interact with it more effectively. And I like to use the analogy of if we treated our significant other the way most of us treat money, we'd be single. Because most of us, we want money when we want it. We want it to show up when we want it. When we get it, we want to show it off to everybody. And then when we're done with it, we just want to move on and not think about it when it's not there. And we pretend like we're really good at it. We pretend like we're experts at it, but we don't spend any time learning about it. Well, that's not the kind of relationship that I want. So if we actually related to money the way we related to a significant other, I want to understand it. I want to know how to make it better every single day. I want to be a better person in this relationship. I want this relationship to grow and to be more powerful and more successful over time. Then we would have the kind of relationship with money where we could not lose. No matter what, we'd always be winning.
So your parents were immigrants. Were they Greek?
Yep. On my dad's side of the family, his parents came over from Greece. On my mom's side of the family, they were French Canadian. They came over from Vancouver. So I'm French Canadian on one side and Greek on the other side. You can call me a freak if you like.
That's good. I like that. So what about a mistake you've made? What is the worst thing you've done with your finances?
Yeah. There was a time when we had a crash and I left my money where it was, which was great. And then it came back. And then I thought like, okay, we're going to have another one. And I sold a whole bunch of stuff and it didn't happen. I screwed that up really badly. I didn't take the own expert's advice. I operated from my fear in that moment and I tried to do something clever and it just bit me in the butt. And I ended up losing some growth on that, and ended up buying it back later on. But those are the kinds of things that, they still happen. I'm not perfect by any means, but it's important for us to notice when we make those mistakes and have that forethought. And then say, you know what? Nope, I'm operating out of my fear, or I'm operating from something like get rich quick now. And I'm trying to get a lot of money right now. When we can catch those moments, we can then ground ourselves, bring us back to the present. Say, okay, I'm going to walk away from this for a minute. I'm going to really think about it and then decide, is this the right course of action?
Yeah, I think our self sabotage often comes just from an inability to simply do nothing, right? With investing, sometimes the best thing is just to do nothing.
Exactly. So what Warren Buffett says all the time. He's like, look, do nothing. You're not an expert. Most people who are listening to this, they may never get to that level of expertise. We're amateurs at best, and listen to the experts who spend a lifetime doing this. Buy and hold, buy and hold, buy and hold.
So do you still, I got to put you on the spot here. Do you still own the same S&P index that you originally bought?
Absolutely.
Okay, good, good.
And then I found some other ones that I really liked. And yes, there are some stocks that I like, individual stocks, and I'll look at them and I'll do my research on them and I'll think, okay, this looks really good. And I can honestly say, if I look at my portfolio and I look at all the different, because I have lots of different IRAs and different accounts, I think on average, I am at like 40 to 45%, on my portfolio. And that's exactly what I want. It's not normal, but that is exactly what I want because I'm just being very, very clear about what it is that I want to do. And that's, of course, over a long period of time. That's not like 40% over a day. That's
Yeah.
40% over a long
Yeah.
period of time.
Okay, so you do own individual stocks. What's the last one you bought? Last stock you bought?
I just bought some the other day, but it was one that I'd already owned. I'm trying to think which one it was. It was a stock that pays a higher dividend. I'm starting to look at converting certain stocks that were growth stocks into dividend stocks. I'm looking at what would it be like to retire and what would I want to do? And I want to have some income coming in versus just growth. And I want to say it was UPS because
Okay.
UPS has a pretty nice dividend, but it wasn't a lot because I want to do more research on it. But yeah, it was one of those.
I think a lot of people, dividend investors, I would include myself in this, we have this image in our head of the day when we can retire and just keep collecting those dividends, right?
It is. It's really nice to think. And then there's the pitfall of, wow, I see this stock's paying like 16, 18% dividend, right? And it's like, okay, well, let's do some research. Let's check it out. Are they losing value every single year? And how long have they been doing that, right? It's easier to have one that's a slower burn, that's very consistent, and that's been consistent over decades versus something that's new and trendy that might disappear and you're going to lose all your money anyway. So, there's a lot of information to absorb. And this is where sometimes bringing an expert in can help you. Again, you don't want to just turn it over to an expert like the baby to somebody you've never met before. Sorry, give me 1 second here. He wants to jump up and sit behind me.
Oh, I saw a picture of a dog. I think it was on your website there. So what kind of dog is he?
This is Harry. I actually got him while I was living in France. He's a purebred French poodle, and he's my best buddy. I just love him to death. Usually he's sleeping behind me on the chair, but this morning he decided to sleep in, and now he's decided it's time to come over and join me.
Do you ever do the traditional poodle haircut or no?
No, I have him in what's called a puppy cut. So it looks, I think, a little bit cuter. And then one year, I think maybe 3 years ago, I decided to try the poodle cut, like the traditional poodle cut. And I took him in and I said, okay, you know what? Let's do the poodle cut. Let's just try it out. When I went to pick him up, I literally didn't recognize him. I did not realize it was my dog. I'm like, oh my God, this is so funny. And I remember I take him over to my mom's 92. And so I take him over almost every day so that they can spend some time together. And I remember her looking at him thinking, oh my gosh, he looks totally different. We enjoyed it for about a week. And then we're like, no, this isn't right. So we decided to let him grow back out into his puppy cut.
Well, I ask because I'm not really a dog person, but when I think of a poodle, I just picture the haircut. So if I see that, I'm like, oh, that's a poodle.
Yes, exactly. The big balls on the tail and on their paws and things like that.
So when you're talking to people, if they want to invest in stocks or take on other investments, do you recommend them to investment advisors? Do you recommend they do research? Do you help them in that process yourself? How do you deal with that?
It's a great question. Part of the work that I do is I give them an assignment and say, okay, I'm giving you $1 million cash free and clear. $1 million cash free and clear. No taxes. It's all taken care of. You've got $1 million. What are you going to do with it? 90% of the time, they'll say something like this. I will buy a new house. I'm going to pay off my mom and dad's house. I'm going to buy a new car. I'm going to quit my job. They just kind of rattle off all these things, go on vacation, things like that. Okay, great. You just spent 5 minutes telling me how you're going to disappear $1 million because that money will be gone in a very, very short period of time. So now your assignment is to go research what you can do with that $1 million to actually have it grow. And that's all I'll tell them. And so now they're charged with, okay, I need to figure this out. And so they'll come back, and sometimes they'll come back with a stock portfolio that they've created where they've done research on different stocks. For others, they'll come back with an investment portfolio that has to do with real estate or some combination of those things. And then they'll present it to me in a way that says, okay, this is what I'm going to do with that $1 million. Here's the risk on this portion, and here's what the benefit is. Here's what the return is on that. And then here's this other portion. Here's the risk or the initial investment. Here's what the return on that is. And suddenly they're now relating to themselves as intelligent people who know how to invest money because they've done the research with this fake $1 million versus all these get rich quick schemes, like, oh, I'm going to invest it in crypto and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. It's grounding them and getting them to a place where they feel comfortable with it, because that for me is the most important thing. If they can get to that place of being comfortable and knowing what they're doing, that's where I want them. And then they can go look at working with a broker, or they can work with a strategist or something like that, because now they've got the fundamentals. They've got the understanding. They can understand what somebody else is talking about. And then they can ask questions, and then they can make a choice, because it is their money. It is their baby. And I want them to take care of it like that.
Now, in the past, 10 years, do you see a lot of your clients coming back to you saying, I'm putting it all in Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin?
Yes. And then I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, well, let's look at Bitcoin over the last 10 years. Let's look at it over the last 5 years. Are you willing to deal with this volatility and this unknown around it? And if they say yes, so okay, great. I will never make a choice for my clients. They get to make the choice, but it's always going to be based on the research that they've done and the clearing of those blocks because look, some people do have an appetite for, especially when they're younger, for those high risk, high reward things. But I want them to understand what they're getting into. I want them to understand the risk. I want them to be clear about what they're doing before they step into it. And I will present both sides of it, but then they'll make the decision at the end of the day. And then we'll come back and we'll say, okay, well, how did it look? What did you do? How are you doing? And then they'll let me know. At the end of the day, it's all about them feeling happy and feeling joyful and just satisfied with what it is that they're doing.
You've been in LA and now you're in Vegas. Do you have a lot of clients talking to you about real estate?
Yes, they'll be looking at it from many different perspectives. Some people are looking at it buying and flipping. Some people are looking at buying a house and then renting the house. Other people are starting to discover index funds that are all about the rental market. That's all these index funds do, is invest in companies that buy and rent homes, or buy and rent apartment complexes, or buy and rent buildings, those kinds of things. And so they can then, wow, I don't ever have to deal with being a landlord myself, because there are a lot of things that come with being a landlord that most people don't look at. And they think, oh, it's just going to be easy. Well, it's not going to be easy. What are you going to, so first of all, are you going to put that house in your own name? Because if you put that house in your own name, you've opened yourself up to exposure for lawsuits and liabilities, and you could lose and now they start looking at, I can put it in an LLC, and that protects me and protects my other assets. Great. Now, what are you going to do if you want to sell that home? How do you get it out of the LLC? And what are the tax implications of that? These are all things that they start to learn on their own. And they start to realize, oh my gosh, I do not want to have to deal with this. And they'll start to come up with the new strategies. But again, it's all about that education. And they can't get to that place of educating themselves until they've reset their financial thermostat. So they're not just thinking from get rich quick schemes. They're actually thinking from, I want to create a future here. And how do I do that?
And for yourself, you've got the business, and it sounds like you invest in your IRAs and stuff like that. Anything else that you do as far as investing?
I like to keep myself in many different areas. So there's only so much you can do in an IRA, because there are limits on what you can put into an IRA. So I like to keep certain amounts of money in cash in a safe place where they're earning interest. I'm invested in precious metals as well, both in the real gold, physical gold that you can hold in your hands, as well as investing in gold stocks. And then there are other, just standard portfolios that you create where you can invest in all sorts of different companies. Sometimes I'll play around and I'll see something, ooh, this looks really interesting. I'll only invest an amount of money that I'm willing to lose when it comes to something like that. And that requires you sitting down and saying, okay, what happens if I lose all of this? What if this company goes belly up and it goes from wherever it is right now to zero? Are you going to be okay with that? Yeah, I'm okay with that. Great. Then that's what I'm going to invest in that. And then I'll enjoy watching whatever it does. But again, it requires a lot of forethought. It requires a lot of work before you can get to that place.
Anything else you think our listeners should know?
I think that overall, before you decide to do anything with your money, you want to look at what's your relationship to money. How are you relating to money and what is your expectation? If you're in the mindset of, I'm going to get rich quick, you've got to do a lot of work on yourself because you're going to end up going broke before you get rich quick. Because we like to look at all the wins that we see. Oh, this person got rich quick. They got good, da, 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 da. But we don't see all the collateral damage, all the millions of people that failed and lost everything. I would rather you choose a path that is going to be more steady and true than the get rich quick scheme. So understand what your financial thermostat setting is. And that's really easy. Look at what it is right now. How much money are you able to earn? How much are you able to keep? And what are your thoughts, feelings, and emotions around money right now? That will tell you exactly where you are. And if you're able to earn enough, you're able to keep enough, you have this great experience around money, perfect. Then start to educate yourself and move forward with what you want to do. But if you're not able to earn enough, you're not able to keep enough, and you're always stressed and worried about money, you want to reset that financial thermostat first before you start taking actions so that you don't just disappear money or throw money into a black hole.
With your clients, what would you say is the number one problem you see? Is it credit card debt, high interest debt?
Well, they do come in. A lot of them come in with credit card debt, but I have a lot of people that come in and they're just completely clueless around money. They're just like, I don't even know where my money goes. They just disappear money every single month. And so one of the first exercises I have them do is look at where are you spending your money. We're going to calculate, we're going to track every single penny. And this is painful for a lot of people because they get to the end of, usually takes 2 or 3 months for them to get to that place where, because they're, things that don't show up every single month, and then it takes them a little bit of time to figure it all out. But then they get to that place where like, oh, I can see now how much I'm spending. Then the reality hits is like, it's way more than I make every month. Like, surprise. And that's why you have so much credit card debt, because you've been closing the gap using credit card debt. Whereas before you weren't paying attention to it. You were just making the minimum payment, everything's fine, but you don't realize you're building debt, not creating wealth. Once they get to that place, now they can say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. No more debt. I'm not creating debt in my life. I'm actually building wealth. Now they can make the right corrections and adjustments so that they're building wealth rather than creating debt.
And they're looking at their budget and going, I'm paying $200 in subscriptions every month to just come off my credit card
that I don't even use. That just disappears every month. Exactly. And then they get to make some of the hard choices, which are, and this is where it really, the rubber starts to meet the road, is like, all my friends are going out to dinner tonight, and I'm not going to go out with them because I don't have the money set aside. I just not going to go into debt just to have another dinner with people. Or I'm not going to go on vacation because I haven't set the money aside to go on vacation. I haven't really earned the right to go on vacation. And earning the right means having the money set aside in advance before you go on vacation, and then seeing how much money you have set aside and not spending more than that. That's when we start to really have power in our lives, because I can go on vacation knowing it's completely paid for. And when I get back from vacation, I'm going to get that credit card bill and I'm going to pay it off in full. Plus, I'm going to get all those bonus miles, which I'm going to then use to go on my next vacation and spend less money on that vacation. Whereas most people, it's the opposite. I deserve a vacation. I'm working my butt off. I don't have the money, but I'm going to put it on a credit card. So they put it on a credit card. They go on vacation. They maybe have a good time the first day. The second day, they're starting to think, is my credit card going to get declined when I try to pay for this thing? And I've got this credit card bill, and they spend the rest of the vacation stressed about the credit card bills that's going to come. And then they spend the next 3 or 4 years trying to pay off that vacation, which they never should have taken in the first place. When we flip that, suddenly vacations are what they're all about. They're supposed to be all about enjoying yourself, relaxing, recharging, going home, and then getting back to work again.
Yeah, that's tough though, because Our governments send us the opposite message, and social media sends us the opposite message. You don't see anyone paying their credit card bill on Instagram, but you see them in all these exotic locales, and the government says, no, we don't have to wait. We don't have to earn the money. We'll just borrow, 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 and spend, spend, spend.
Yes, and you're absolutely right on this, Terry, because we do live in a culture where our government is doing one thing that is counterintuitive to creating wealth, and social media is all about, oh, look at all these cool things that I'm doing. And the majority of social media, and I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people on social media are going in debt so that people think they look wealthy. And the hard choice is, are you willing to give up looking wealthy so that you can actually have wealth? Are you willing to give up going into debt so you can look wealthy? People can think you're really wealthy so that you can actually build the kind of wealth you want people to think you have. When you can make that shift, suddenly you're in a whole different ballgame. Or hockey match. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm country appropriate.
Yes. Well, I think the number one vehicle of millionaires in the United States is a Ford F-150, I want to say. I think I read that somewhere, but it's not a Bugatti.
Yeah, they don't care what you think. They just want to get a car that works for them, that's reliable. They're not the people that are out there buying all the labels. They don't care. They're just interested in creating and building that wealth and having it last and having the life that they want to have. What other people think is irrelevant to them.
Okay, so if people want to get a hold of you, they should go to periclesrellas.com. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. That's my website. That's where my free masterclass is. The links to all of my other social media accounts. That is the best place.
But you're active all over the place. You're on TikTok and X a little bit and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, anytime I'm doing any kind of content, I try to get it across all the platforms, TikTok, YouTube, and X as well. So yeah, I'll just kind of stream it to all three and just kind of let people consume wherever they feel most comfortable.
And you're a podcast veteran extraordinaire. You've been on all kinds of podcasts, eh?
Yes, I'm probably moving in on 60 podcasts. I just love talking about this. I love having the conversation because I know there may be somebody out there that's going to hear something and it's going to make a difference. And that's really what I'm committed to.
Well, that's great. It's nice to see you helping people reset their financial thermostat. And hopefully we'll talk to you again sometime. And by then you'll have to start following hockey a little and then we can have something else to talk about.
I will work on that for sure. Terry, it's great to meet you and thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Nexia Biotechnologies, the stock I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, it was a bit of a media sensation for a while. They trademarked the name BioSteel for their spider silk fiber that was supposed to be 10 times as strong as steel. And there were newspaper headlines and blog posts about the transformative nature of this new wonder material. But it turns out that creating spider silk is not just as easy as milking a transgenic goat. The company was burning through cash and not really generating any revenues. They eventually went bankrupt and sold their remaining assets to Parmathene, which later merged with Ultimmune. And that's a bit of a dud that still trades on the NASDAQ for less than $5 a share. As for the goats, the remaining two were given to the Canadian Agriculture and Food Museum. They are presumably dead now. There are still some labs and companies working with their technology today, but I can't say if there's any actual viable commercial applications. As for the unlucky shareholders, which I was among them, there was a one-time cash distribution of 72 cents a share. So I recovered $144 of my original 1,500 plus investment. That was a loss of over 90% when they were eventually delisted in 2009. The experience with Nexia kind of soured me a bit on biotech and unproven technologies in general. Some extra info and fact checks on the stuff that we talked about today. We talked about the paintings that Pericles has behind him. One of them is of Madame du Pompadour. And if you're unfamiliar with her, you should look her up. She was one of Louis XV's mistresses. And she was officially titled chief mistress. This was a thing. These French kings would have official mistresses in addition to their queen and many minor mistresses as well. I was listening to someone recently. I can't remember if it was on the Odd Lots podcast or maybe it was Lex Friedman, but they were talking about how our current time is very similar to the French Revolution. And certainly if you look at the differences in wealth and lifestyle from what are the ruling elites to the masses, you can see the parallels with that time. But Madame de Pompadour was a force of nature. She was reportedly involved in the first Treaty of Versailles. She was mourned by people like Voltaire. Just a fascinating lady. I recommend looking into it for anyone who's interested. We also mentioned Jack Bogle, and he is the ultimate pioneer of low-cost index funds. It's basically incalculable how much money his innovations at Vanguard have saved investors over the years. And he's got a bunch of books. His little book of common sense investing is a great start for anyone. The interactive show Tamara that Pericles talks about was written by an Albertan playwright. John Krizank, I think is how you say it. So we have to plug it since he's an Albertan. The last time, though, it was staged was in 2014 in Pittsburgh, I think. But maybe someone will hear this and do a revival. It seems to have been very commercially successful when it was put on. And if you are planning on reviving the show, feel free to get in touch with me. I've got a brother and sister that are both in acting. I'm sure they'd be happy for the work. Pericles talks about working in theater in Toronto and his parents working first in New York and then LA. And if you don't know, like for live theater globally, London in the UK is undisputed #1 city, with New York usually being listed as #2. There's no real clear #3, but I mean, Toronto would certainly make any top 10 list for live theater. The shows there are great and it's way cheaper than Broadway. Pericles talks about working for Nichelle Nichols when she asked. Well, of course. If Nichelle Nichols asks you to do something, you do it. If you don't know, she is the woman who played Uhura on the original Star Trek and just a fantastic, groundbreaking actress in her own right. Certainly one of the first Black women to be featured on a big TV show. Martin Luther King was a fan. She has an asteroid named after her. Her kiss with William Shatner was one of the first interracial kisses on TV. She's inspired people to become astronauts. Unfortunately, she died in 2022 at the ripe old age of 89. She certainly did live long and prosper, as Mr. Spock would have wished for her. We also talked about UPS, and I think maybe we should have Pericles back at some point because he talked about UPS when we recorded this. It was October 13th. And UPS was yielding upwards of 7%. But since then, they released some great earnings. They went from about $84 when we recorded this to about $96 in the 2 weeks it took me to edit it. About 14% in 2 weeks is pretty good. So maybe we'll have to pick Pericles' brain a little bit more about his stock selection process. And when I ask Pericles if he's Greek, it's obviously because of the name Pericles, who was famous Greek statesman and general during the Golden Age of Athens. That's often called actually the age of Pericles when he was around. And I think it's just a pretty cool name. Please remember that the information on Terry Hogan Talks Stocks is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not investment advice. Please do your own due diligence. And you should probably just buy the index anyway. The opinions of the guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host, the crew of the Starship Enterprise, or the French aristocracy. If you like what you hear on the show, please do all the right stuff, like follow, rate, leave a review, tell a friend. If you have questions or would like to be a guest on Terry Hogan Talks Stocks and tell us about your first, your worst, your best, and your last investment, you can find me on X at Terry M. Hogan, or you can send me an email at terrymhogan@gmail.com. We'll leave you with a quote from Jack Bogle on buying an index fund. Don't look for the needle in the haystack. Just buy the haystack.